بسم الله الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع سنته إلى يوم الدين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome again to another episode of your weekly Islamic chat show, Guest of the Week, coming to you from Sharjah TV, Sharjah Broadcasting Authority. As always, I'm your host Ismail Bullock, and today inshallah in this last episode in Ramadan, we want to focus in the importance of making the most of the end of Ramadan and some of the things that you should be doing now and some of the things that will take place during this last part of Ramadan. And to do that with me is Ustadh Mohammad Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair for coming on.
Wa iyaakum, it's always a pleasure.
Now, of course, the last days, which we're going to discuss, we have things like i'tikaf and the last 10 days, and then obviously after that we'll have Eid. But before we go into that, we want to maybe give some advice or give some hope or give some encouragement for those people who are looking at it and say there's only hardly anything left of Ramadan and I haven't really done much. I haven't done much ibadah. I haven't really changed my ways. So I haven't really made the most of it. So we want to kind of give them a bit of advice and encouragement in the first part of the show on what they should, if anyone has falling into that category of those who haven't done what they should have done, they haven't made the most of Ramadan.
Okay, so after saying Alhamdulillah and sending Salah and Salam upon the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is something that I think we all face to a greater or lesser extent. I think there's almost everybody watching here who would say that to one extent or another, we feel like we haven't quite got where we want to be. And to a certain extent, as long as that feeling doesn't lead to despair, it's a healthy feeling. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْتُونَ مَا آتَوْا وَقُلُوبُهُمْ وَجِلَةٌ أَنَّهُمْ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ رَاجِعُونَ. Those people who give what they give when their hearts are trembling. And the Prophet ﷺ explained that trembling in their hearts is a fear that it won't be accepted, that they haven't done enough, that they will be returning to their Lord. And it also leads us to another point before we talk about the remedy, which is that a person really needs to be aware of their iman. Some of the Sahaba used to say this, that from the fiqh of a person is that he should be aware of his iman. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is he in a good place? Is he not? So being aware of yourself, recognizing that you haven't quite done as much as you wanted to, that's actually a pretty praiseworthy and beneficial thing. It's not a bad thing at all. What we do need to do though is some corrective action. And one of the most beautiful things to give us hope is a principle which applies to all of the categories of Islamic actions, which is that the end of the action, the khawatim, that is the ends of an action are what matter. The ends of an action are what matter. And so we always look at the end of an action more than we look at the beginning of it. And so if the beginning was a little bit shaky, if it wasn't quite right, the most important thing is to end on a high. And so don't, sit there and say, I've wasted this many days of Ramadan. But instead, even if there is one single day left of Ramadan, even if there is an hour left of Ramadan, you can finish on a high and you can have that sort of apply retrospectively to the whole month. So there is a huge opportunity for people to still take advantage. We still have even an hour or 10 minutes or a day. There is time left. While there is time left, you can take advantage. But you have to really genuinely want to. It's not enough to say that I want to take advantage of it. But then again, the laziness comes in, and there's got to be that azima, that sort of dedication and desire to want to actually achieve it.
Motivate yourself.
Yeah, basically. Motivation and say, let's finish this Ramadan on a high. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the attributes that He's told us about Him, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts. He accepts tawbah. He accepts the deeds that you do. So do whatever you can that is left in this time and put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it.
And it's interesting because we mentioned on some of the other guests, when we had discussions on previous Ramadan episodes, we mentioned the hadith which mentions that the gates of hell are closed and the gates of Jannah are opened. And the part that I want to focus on now is the part that mentioned that, and every night there are people who Allah frees from the hellfire.
Absolutely.
So this is also something to realize that is, the hadith says, every night.
Every night.
So again, you're coming to the end, and we're also going to mention the 10 nights themselves, which themselves have a lot of potential for forgiveness. But even generally speaking, every night in Ramadan, you have that chance, inshallah, if you turn to Allah in sincerity and sincere tawbah, to be one of those that Allah knows best may have been destined to spend maybe some time in the hellfire, as we know that the Muslim, a believer, will not go to hellfire forever, but they may be sent for a time as a cleansing for whatever sins they may have committed. So you still have the chance to be one of these people.
Absolutely.
At any night of Ramadan.
Absolutely. And also when you think about Ramadan, you think about that the best part of Ramadan is the end of Ramadan. This is the part of the month which is the best part of the best month, is the end of Ramadan. So also the deeds that you do in the end of Ramadan are worth more than the deeds that you do in the beginning as well. So there's still a chance to, and of course the best one and the successful one is the one that catches all of it, the beginning, the middle and the end. But for those who might have fallen short, don't give up on that portion, because you still have a huge portion of good. And just think of it, that Laylatul Qadr is worth 1,000 months. 1,000 months. And if you get that night, and we're going to talk about how to get it and how to make sure that you are from those people who stand on Laylatul Qadr. You get that one night, that's 1,000 months of worship.
I guess that brings us on to the last 10 nights of Ramadan. How important are these nights? What should we do during these nights?
Absolutely. So they're the best nights of the year. They're the best nights of the year. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned their virtue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالْفَجْرِ وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ. So the 10 nights Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swore by. Some of the scholars of tafsir said that these are the last 10 nights of Ramadan. And in them is the best night. إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ فِي لَيْلَةِ الْقَدْرِ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أَلْفِ شَهْرٍ. Better than 1,000 months. So these are nights which have extreme virtue. And the Prophet ﷺ, when the last 10 nights would come, he would do certain things. First of all, there is an expression which is kind of to tighten your belt. In other words, that everything gets left aside. You really step it up another level. Already you may be, and for the Prophet ﷺ, it was already at the most perfect form of worship that a human being can do. And yet still in the last 10 nights, he would even further. He would further push himself to do even more. He would wake up his family on those nights. He wouldn't just leave them to rest as he might have done in the early nights of Ramadan or in the other months when he would pray. He would, and as it's mentioned in some of the hadith, أحيا ليلة, he would make his night alive. Generally, the night is a place to sleep. وَجَعَلْنَا نَوْمَكُمْ سُبَاتًا. We've made your nighttime a time for rest and sleep and relaxation. It's not a time for, but in the last 10 nights of Ramadan, you make your night come alive.
To become much more, so you could say, much more active than one would expect in the evening.
Alive with worship though. Because what a lot of people do, and especially, we see it in the Gulf a lot, it's very common, that during the nights of Ramadan are alive, but they're not alive with obedience to Allah.
They might be alive with TV or...
They might be alive with either disobedience or either al-mubahat, the things which are halal, but they don't bring you any reward in them. Alive shopping, alive eating, alive,
walking around in a shopping mall, which, as you said, maybe,
exactly.
But you kind of say to yourself, what a waste.
What a waste.
What you could have been doing in these last 10 nights or the nights of Ramadan could be so much more valuable to you.
So if we go back to this hadith, we have three things. That he would make his night alive with worship. He would tighten his belt, so he would really step it up even more in terms of his worship. And he would wake up his family and involve his family in it. So it's no longer now, sort of maybe someone, is there are people who have a little more energy for Qiyam al-Layl than others? That's natural. There are some people, each person, as Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala indicated, that each person has good deeds that are easy for that person. So, some people, they find it easy to wake every night. But even those who find it difficult, even those who typically don't pray Qiyamul Layl, even those who typically don't spend a lot of their night awake, the last 10 nights is a time where everybody, from the men, the women, the younger people, they all, the young people, they all wake up, get up and spend as much of their night in worship as possible. At the same time, we don't still want a person to burn themselves out. There has to be a balance in that. And when I say burn yourself out, for example, the 21st night comes and the person, is up from sort of, they eat after Isha briefly, they pray Isha, or they pray Isha, they pray Taraweeh, then they're there until Fajr. But sometimes they may not be able to continue that the next day, and then drops off. And that's why you see, typically in any masjid, certainly here we see that the first potential night of the 10, the first night of the 10 nights, the masjid is full. By the 25th, 26th night, it's not even a quarter full. And then you see on the 27th night that the masjid fills again. So this is another issue, that it's more about having that regular, consistent worship. Even if it means that you start with the Imam, you finish with the Imam, perhaps you pray Qiyam with the Imam, you finish, and you have a little bit of Quran that you read, that's, fantastic. So what about the deeds that a person, should do in terms of the last 10 nights?
Maybe I can just stop you before we go.
Okay, before that,
just before we go for a break, what about those people who say, well, I've prayed Taraweeh prayer, so can I still do Qiyam al-Layl? Would I have done too many rak'ah, for example, or should I just not pray Taraweeh because I'm doing Qiyam al-Layl later?
There's no doubt that there are some of the scholars who held the opinion that the number of rak'at has to be, it can't exceed the 8 rak'at that the Prophet ﷺ used to pray in Ramadan or outside. However, what appears to me to be the stronger opinion, and the opinion that I favor, is that it is permissible to pray as many rak'at as you wish, and that the 8 that the Prophet ﷺ he prayed was not an 8 which is restrictive, i.e. it has to be 8 and it cannot exceed or go down. Rather, the early generations, the companions and those who came after them, especially the generation of the Tabi'een, it was very common among them that they would pray different numbers, each according to their ability. And there's no doubt that 8 that you pray slowly and carefully and with khushu' and concentration is worth more than, perhaps 20 that you pray very, very quickly, but each according to what is easy for them. The one who wants to come for Qiyam al-Layl and pray that, the one who wants to come for Taraweeh and then come again for Qiyam al-Layl, the one who suffices themselves with Taraweeh because the one who begins with the Imam and concludes with the Imam, then it is as if he had prayed the whole night. Even though typically many of the masajid would have the same Imam who would pray Taraweeh and then come back for Qiyam al-Layl and then conclude with Witr at that time. So at the end of the day, this issue is an easy issue. There's flexibility in it for people according to what is easy for them. But there is no doubt that the action of the Prophet ﷺ was not to exceed 8 raka'at plus his witr and so on.
And what about the case where someone says, well, I did witr with the local imam, but I went to another mosque that do qiyam al-layl if that one doesn't. So they said that now I'll be doing witr twice. Is there an issue there?
Yes, you can't pray. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited praying 2 witr prayers in one night. So the person has different options here. One option which is quite common is that a person will pray witr and then stand up to make another rak'ah. In other words, they pray their first witr is witr, or if they know they're going to pray later, they make the first one a regular, sort of sunnah prayer, and then again in the second witr they pray it as a normal witr. But also the option is just simply not to pray the first witr, and to go and simply pray the last one.
Okay, fine. On that note, we'll just go for a break. Join us inshallah after this short break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Just before the break we discussed obviously about doing the qiyam and taraweeh and about doing what happens in the case of witr. Now just before that you were about to start mentioning what kind of deeds that you can do during these last 10 days?
Absolutely. Before that, on the witr topic, actually, there's one other point. Someone says, should I pray witr with the first prayer that I pray or with the last one? And if we look at the ahadith in this, we see that the Prophet ﷺ advised that the normal time for witr, or the best time for witr, is after you have prayed all of your qiyam. But he advised certain companions, among them Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, to pray witr before he went to sleep. So from this, what we can take is, if a person believes that they may have a chance they will miss the last witr, they might sleep, they might not make it, they might have something that makes them busy, or they become preoccupied, or they forget, or they have a tendency to do that, it is better for them to pray witr at the beginning of the night. In other words, to pray before they go to sleep. If, however, they are confident that they can reach for the witr that occurs after all of the prayers are finished, then this is better for them, but they can't repeat witr twice. So what they can do is they can pray with the first imam and then bring a rak'ah afterwards, and then again pray and just pray the witr at the end, or they can pray witr in the first one and not in the second. But that's an interesting point about which is better. It depends on your habit. If you know you can get up for the last one and you'll be there, then that's better. But if you can't, then it's better to pray witr rather than to wake up the next day having not prayed it.
I guess we can put that in our, even outside of Ramadan, because we know that those were the sunnahs, like the 2 rak'ah before Fajr and the witr, that Prophet ﷺ would never miss. So much so that I believe it's the Hanafi madhab that believe that it's almost, or they believe it's fard to do those 2 sunnah and witr. So I guess that could be a habit, that if you do know you're a person who may later on go to bed and will be too lazy to do witr or won't get around to it, then maybe sometimes it's better to do it slightly after Isha, where you know at least you've done it. We could implement that as a general rule.
That comes from the hadith of Abu Hurairah. As you said, the Ahnaf say that it's wajib, but it comes from the hadith of Abu Hurairah and others who were advised to pray witr before they went to sleep, because theirs was a habit that if they left it, they may not. They may, stay up late revising, studying, and then, miss the witr for some reason. So if you know that that's your habit, to miss it, like you're on and off and you're not regular, it's better to pray it before you go to sleep and then wake up for qiyam, pray your qiyam, but pray it without the witr, because you can't duplicate them in one night. So back to the question that you asked me regarding the deeds in the last 10 nights. So this is really, there's really a couple of things that are particularly highlighted in the last 10 nights. One of them is prayer. So we want to spend as much of that night in prayer as we can do consistently and regularly. And I really want to emphasize this consistency, because some people have a really bad habit when it comes to Ramadan of picking and choosing the nights that they do their ibadah. So I'm going to come on the 27th night. There is no guarantee that Laylatul Qadr is going to fall on the 27th night. In reality, if that's perhaps the most likely night, it was the opinion of some that it falls on that night. But the reality is the Prophet ﷺ told us to find it in the last 10 nights, in the odd nights. The other thing is that even as the scholars mention, the opinion about the odd nights also may change depending on whether the month is long or short. So if the month is long, it may be that the night you thought was even was odd, and the night you thought was odd was actually even. And likewise, if the month is short. So in reality, the person who feels that they can just sort of turn up every couple of days, every 3 days on the 27th night, we're not going to say that person doesn't get any good, because inshallah that person does. And we know that the qiyam and the taraweeh are voluntary, they're not obligatory. But that person is not a person who can authoritatively and comfortably say that I prayed on Laylatul Qadr.
I think the fact that, as you mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ to seek it in the last 10 days is more than enough to show us that we have to actively seek it. And how are we going to seek it? Literally means, by being in the mosque, trying to be one who's witnessed by us, in the sense of, is there praying on that? Yeah. So that's I think that's a clear enough indication for us that we have to daily be there.
The person who can say, I prayed on Laylatul Qadr, is the one who prayed from in reality every night of Ramadan, but certainly in those last 10 days or even 11, that the person prayed all of them, that person, inshallah ta'ala, is the one who can say that, Alhamdulillah, I prayed on Laylatul Qadr. As for the one who came on one night or 2 nights, or it might be that I come on the 25th, the 23rd, 25th and 27th, but I don't come on the 29th, at the end of the day, it's very risky. So that's the prayer. And that can include voluntary prayers. It can include extra prayers if you feel that, for example, often it is that the masjid makes it easy on the congregation. So I know when I used to be living in the UK, we used to have, we would finish the Quran completely from beginning to end every Ramadan, sometimes more than once with the Imam. So for us, when we came, and then we sort of came to a masjid where the habit is to finish not even a quarter or a third of the Quran in the whole of Ramadan, you know, subhanAllah, like you sort of feel like you can do a little more. So there is nothing wrong with going home and doing a few more, you know, lengthen it out yourself. Or, you know, picking and choosing the masjid that you feel, you know, maybe lengthens it a little bit. But again, for people who want to bring their family, sometimes the shorter Taraweeh and Qiyam prayers are better for the families, you know, make it easy on the women, children and so on. And then the one who wants to stand and pray longer, they can do so. So prayer is one. One is reciting the Quran, because this is the month of the Quran, and from the actions of the early generations is that when Ramadan would come, they would leave off all of their topics that they would teach aside from the Quran. They would leave off even hadith. They would leave off the study of hadith and the reading of hadith that they used to do, and they would turn to the Quran. So having yourself a portion of the Quran, even now someone's watching and say, I haven't done this Ramadan. Set yourself a portion now. Maybe, okay, you know, if you have a night left and you're not going to set yourself the whole Quran because it may be difficult for you, but set yourself a portion of the Quran. Until now, if you have 5 nights left, you have 6 nights left, set yourself a portion of the Quran that you're going to finish each day so that you can finish as much of it as possible. And ideally, really, in the last 10 days, you want to do at least one complete reading of the Quran. On top of that, the things which relate to the Quran, which could be things like reading the Quran in your own language. I don't think you should do that as much as you recite it. I think you should recite it more, because reciting it has a greater reward in terms of the reward of reciting the Arabic. But give a little time in Ramadan. Let's say, for example, typically, some people might finish the Quran 3 times. So finish the Quran 3 times with your Arabic recitation from the Mus'haf, and add 1 time in Ramadan that you finish it in your preferred language, English or whatever it may be. Or even if you're Arabic speaking, you read through some, you know, notes on the margins, a small book of Tafsir al-Sa'di, for example. Beautiful. You just go through and pick up those points of benefit that help you to understand the Quran more. And if you can do this, and this is a great habit, if you can do it, is that you precede the Imam. So you recite the Quran prior to the Imam reciting. If the Imam is going in order, it's very helpful, because it means that in your prayer you can really focus on it. So the Quran is definitely a time for the Quran. So I would advise those 2 things: the prayer and the Quran. And of course, there are whatever good deeds you do in that time. Someone feeds his neighbors, gives some sadaqah, but that's particular. And then, of course, in terms of sadaqah, we have yet to talk about the issue of zakatul fitr and so on. But this primarily in the nights, we want to be spending most of the time in those things, in prayer and in the time with the Quran.
Now, is there, for example, any specific du'as we can make? For example, the du'a is, you know, we know that there's a du'a, Allahumma innaka afuwan tuhibbul afu fa'fu anna. Is this highly recommended? Is there any other du'as we can add to this?
So Aisha radiyallahu anha, she asked the Prophet ﷺ that if I knew which night was Laylatul Qadr, what should I say in it? And the Prophet ﷺ said to her to say, Allahumma innaka afuwun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anni. And in another narration, Allahumma innaka afuwun kareemun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anni. This dua, O Allah, you are the one who pardons, always pardoning, and you love to pardon, so pardon me. This is the best dua that you can say on Laylatul Qadr. However, the topic of dua is a big one. You have a lot of dua that you can make in the last 10 nights. It's a time when your dua is, inshallah ta'ala, accepted, or you have a hope that it has more opportunity to be accepted. So it's a time when you can really increase in dua, and you can actually widen your dua out to whatever it is that you want to make dua for. But particularly in Ramadan, this dua, and there are many others that the Prophet ﷺ would say frequently inside and outside of Ramadan. I'll tell you the two du'as that he would say the most frequently in general would be Ya Muqallib al-Qulub, Thabbit Qalbi ala Dinik. O turner of the hearts, make my heart firm upon your religion. And the other one is Rabbana atina fi dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhab an-nar. O Allah, give us good in this world and good in the hereafter, and save us from the hellfire. As well as those that relate in terms of Ramadan, specifically to Ramadan, asking Allah to allow us to stand Laylatul Qadr iman wa ihtisaba, with iman and with expectation of reward from Allah. These are all things that we can say. But the topic of dua is vast, as long as we stick within the methodology and the way which is mentioned within the Sunnah.
I think that dua is quite pertinent, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ himself, the best of all mankind, used to ask Allah to keep his heart firm on the religion. So what about us?
No doubt.
That should be something that should be on our daily
Definitely.
du'as without fail.
Definitely.
We are the ones who, compared to the Prophet ﷺ, no doubt, we are the ones who definitely need that.
Definitely. And remember that dua is of two types as well. There is dua al-mas'ala, where you're asking Allah for something, but there's also dua al-ibadah, where you're praising Allah. And don't forget to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, it's narrated regarding the day of Arafah, that the best thing that the best supplication you can make is to say, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahul mulk wa lahul hamd wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. That just shows you the value of dua without even asking for anything. So also, to mix it up and to bring in all of the etiquettes of dua is a long topic, but that's something very, very greatly beneficial that a person can do to remember Allah, engage in dhikr, to say subhanallah bihamdi, subhanallah al-azim. All of these general adhkar, they don't have a time. You don't want to be saying a dua that has a particular time, or a dhikr that has a particular time, unless it's that time. But the ones that are general, things you say at any time, all the time, and everyone has their needs, and no doubt asking Allah, and one of the best things you can ask Allah for in the last 10 nights of Ramadan is to be from the utaqa, the people who are freed from the hellfire, and to say Allahumma a'tiq, or Allah, free me, or free my neck, as they say, like they say a'tiq, riqabana, or Allah, free our necks from the hellfire, min an-nar. So this is no doubt, to ask Allah to make us from the utaqa that He has in every single night. There's a lot of things that we can talk about in that.
So I guess we can basically summarize the same, but in these last 10 days, you can increase in the prayer, but in so many good deeds. That's the best, I guess.
No doubt.
Okay, inshallah. We'll just go for our next break. Join us, inshallah, after this break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Now, Ustadh Mohammad, another important topic that I guess that comes up within these last 10 nights is the topic of i'tikaf, secluding yourself in the mosque. So I guess we can start off by talking about what is the benefit or the reward and the purpose behind this i'tikaf.
No doubt. So i'tikaf is a hugely beneficial act of worship, and it's a very great act of worship, and it is to seclude yourself in the masjid for a period of time, and inshallah it doesn't have a minimum period of time, in the sense that I don't believe that it's correct to say that you have to do it for a minimum of 24 hours or you have to do it for 10 days, something like that. But a person secludes themselves in the masjid. And when we say seclude, it's really important that we highlight that. It's not to go in the masjid and talk to your friends who are also secluded in the masjid. It's very common that i'tikaf is a very social activity among many people. It's a time which is why I think if I get the chance to do i'tikaf, I prefer to do it in a place where I don't know anybody, ideally, because I want to be in a place where I don't have, the whole point is not to have any social interactions as much as possible. It's not forbidden to speak to someone, but your purpose is to seclude yourself. And it can take place inside of Ramadan or outside of Ramadan, but typically the masajid give permission for it inside of Ramadan usually. It's very important that a person takes proper permission from their local masjid, where they have to fill in a form or they have to pass their name to administration in order to keep things running, properly and smoothly for the maslaha amma, the general benefit of the people. But you seclude yourself in the masjid, and that time is between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You try to avoid going out of the masjid during that time for anything except need. Of course, you can go outside to use the bathroom. If food can't be brought into the masjid, you can go outside to eat, but you are outside for the time it takes to fulfill your need, and you're back into the masjid. And you can do it even for a shorter time. Even if you wanted to do it for an evening, for example, you could. But particularly in the last 10 days, there is a particular sunnah that you try to do i'tikaf for some or all of those 10 days. So the days and the nights. And again, it's not about like, sleeping in the day. It's really trying to spend as much of that time between you and Allah, turning to Allah, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making dua, reciting the Quran, and distancing yourself from all of the other factors of life, and not having your phone and being sort of, as active on social media as you might be when you're outside, but really disconnecting yourself from everything. That's a huge benefit, and the reward is immense in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this person has dedicated themselves to Allah Azza wa Jal. And so it's something that we should all try to do, especially that in our time it's something that has been made relatively easy in many places. In many places in the world it's become easier. There's the well-organized sort of things that people can do. But one point I wanted to note on i'tikaf, which is sort of a common mistake, is relating to the women. So it's perfectly acceptable for a lady to do i'tikaf as long as she can remain properly covered and secluded from the men. So the women's section, providing that has proper facilities and so on. But what a lot of people, we see people making a mistake is we see, for example, a woman doing i'tikaf in her house, for example. This is something people do. They'll say like, oh, the lady's doing i'tikaf in her room. I'tikaf is in the masjid, to the point that even some of the scholars said i'tikaf is only in the Masjid al-Haram and the Masjid al-Nabawi and Masjid al-Aqsa. But we said, inshallah, it's broader than that. And it's better that you do it, inshallah, in a proper masjid where they do the 5 daily prayers and the Jumu'ah. But i'tikaf is not something you can do in the house or something like that. You need to do it in the masjid.
Very briefly, so we can move on to the final topics. What are something that people, if they do, they invalidate this i'tikaf, that it's no longer considered to be a valid i'tikaf?
So I think one of the primary things that a person would do is a person leaves the masjid without a need or a reason and prolongs that absence from the masjid. That's one of the main things that people do. So a person, goes out, I'm going to meet my friends socially, I'm going to go for dinner, and then I'm going to come back and, in that case, you really need to intend that you're concluding your i'tikaf, go and do what you need to do, come back and start a new i'tikaf. But you can't, the prolonged absences from the masjid without reason. Again, if somebody says there's an emergency at home, and the person goes and quickly completes a job, but they literally see themselves that, it's almost like they're on a rope, they're just getting pulled back to the masjid. I'm just out there for a moment to do what I need to do, and I'm straight back inside. But these prolonged absences without reason, this is from the main things. And also, if a person were to do actions during the i'tikaf which are not befitting and appropriate for the i'tikaf. A person, for example, is engaged in social, it's a social activity for them, chatting, and then we're not going to say it invalidates the i'tikaf, but it certainly reduces the reward of it. Or a person behaving in the masjid inappropriately and things like this. But other than that, I think that's what occurs to me.
Okay, inshallah. Now, something that always to some people causes a bit of, I guess, confusion, or they don't understand exactly what and how they're supposed to do it, is the zakat al-fitr, the giving of, which we'll mention, giving of ideally food items. And you get people who are confused that, do I give food, can I give money, and why do we do this? So maybe we can explain briefly what is the purpose of zakat al-fitr and what is the correct way to give this zakat al-fitr.
Okay, so zakat al-fitr is something that is obligatory upon every Muslim who has the ability, and that includes children, babies, and it's even beneficial to give it on behalf of even an unborn child. You know, you're talking about all of the members of the family. And it's typically given by the head of the household on behalf of those members of the family. And what it is a sa'. And a sa', first of all, we have to understand, is a measure of volume. It's like we would use a liter today, or we would use, milliliters, or we would use fluid ounces. It's a measure of volume. It's not a measure of weight. So you can't say that a sa' is X number of kilos. It's a measure of volume, not a measure of weight. So this is the first mistake people make in zakat al-fitr. Yes, many of the scholars, they will put an equivalent weight on common items. But just understand the asl, the fundamental principle is that zakat al-fitr is a measure of volume. It's a sa', it's a measure of how much you can fit into a certain space, not how much something weighs. And it's a sa' of the staple food of the country where you are. So if people typically eat rice, it could be a sa' of rice. If people typically eat dates, it could be a sa' of dates. If people typically eat wheat or whatever is the staple food that people would typically eat and be able to have a nice meal with, it is a sa' of that. Now, a sa' in terms of measure, we know is 4 mud. And we know that the scholars differed over the volume of a mud between 500 to 750 ml. But personally, I, on a personal note, prefer to go with a larger amount. So if we go with a larger amount, then that equates to 3 liters rather than 2 liters. But the scholars differ between 2 and 3 liters being a sa'. So what I personally do, I like to actually give it to people on a personal, personally. You don't have to do it, but I go and buy a big bag of rice. I open it up, I get my measuring jug out, and I measure 3 liters of worth in a measuring jug of rice, take it up, and that's my sa'. And I know I feel confident it's my, I know you can buy a sa' pre-packaged and pre-made, but the kids do it and go out and give it to somebody in need. I think so many times we have people who say, oh, there's nobody in need. I don't know anybody in need. And reality is there's somebody probably within, almost throwing distance of you. There'll be somebody in need. Even if you live in the most affluent area, there'll be somebody who doesn't have enough food for Eid. Somebody within range of you. It could be a worker of some kind. It could be a low salaried worker of some kind. It could be a person who's lost their job. It could be a person going through some kind of financial hardship. If you really know that your area well, you'll know that there are people who need it. If you struggle with that and you don't want to do it and you want to buy a sa', no problem, you can. But you really should make sure that sa' is equivalent to, the 3 liters or, between the 2 and the 3 liters that the scholars say. And the second thing is, if you're going to pay money, you can't pay money to a poor person. What you can do is pay money to an organization who will then go and buy and distribute food on your behalf. And if you feel that, the country you're in is very affluent and most of the people are being given, then there is no harm if you wish to give it to a company or a charity who will spend it for people abroad. We don't see any harm in that. What we used to do in the UK, because people used to have quite a lot, is we used to actually advertise in the masjid that we are going to give out zakat al-fitr. Whoever needs zakat al-fitr, come and take it, and whatever is left that we don't give out to people, whatever is left, then we arrange to send that abroad. So it kind of, thought that's okay as well. So you got to make sure that company is reliable, charity, approved, and so on. That is going to give that out to the people who need it. But there's no harm in giving it in money if you are entrusting someone to give it out on your behalf. But the key thing is here, that there is a time limit for zakat al-fitr. First of all, in terms of the early start, ideally you want to bring it a day or maximum 2 days before Eid. You don't want to be giving it out. If you give it in money, it's okay because they don't purchase anything with it until then. But you don't want to be giving it out, let's say for example, to a poor person 10 days before Eid. A day or 2 days before. And the time limit in terms of the end time limit is that you need to have arranged for the distribution of it before the Eid prayer starts. So it can't be something that, after Eid prayer, I go and do it. If you do it after Eid prayer, it is sadaqah. It's not zakatul fitr. And there's no expiation for that. But it's not a zakatul fitr if you have gone after the Eid prayer on Eid day and given it out.
Okay, I guess very quickly, because we've got like maybe 3 or 4 minutes left. Eid. Just a very brief thing on what should they do on Eid and what should they avoid on Eid, if we can fit that in.
Absolutely. So for me, Eid's very, very important that Eid is a day of obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal. It's not a day of disobedience. So if it's the case that all Ramadan you've been a really good practicing Muslim and your iman has gone up, and then on Eid you throw it all away by doing every kind of haram it's possible to do, skipping the prayers and not going to the masjid anymore and not reading the Quran anymore, and either becoming busy with the halal, the mubahat, or becoming busy with the haram. Subhanallah, this is a sign of, sadly, it's a sign of Ramadan not being accepted. Because we know that Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَيَزِيدُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ اهْتَدَوْا هُدًى. Allah gives an increasing guidance to those who are guided. Meaning that if your day of Eid is a day of obedience and guidance and a day of a continuation, no one's expecting you to hit the highs of Laylatul Qadr, but a continuation of your ibadah and your turning to Allah and your prayer, then take glad tidings that it's a very good sign that your Ramadan has been accepted. And we're not going to say that whoever has a bad Eid, your Ramadan is not being accepted, but we're going to say that it's a danger. You start to worry about your Ramadan not being accepted when your Eid day it turns out. So just make it a day of obedience, that's all. Don't make it a day of all the haram that people, it's like kind of stocking up the haram. It's like a cheat day, you're on a diet, stocking up all the haram that you want to do and then doing it all on that day. Make it a day that feels like a continuation of Ramadan. It doesn't feel like, a complete opposite to it.
So, I mean, just to end, I guess, it's a day where we should be happy and celebrate and get together with family and eat
Absolutely.
And have fun and give gifts even, and that can all be done without transgressing the boundaries and falling into the harm. Well, Jazakallah khair for coming on this final show. And inshallah, see you viewers, same time, same place, bi'idhnillah. As always, I leave you with the greetings of Islam, the greetings of peace. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.